Welcome to ISL Enabled Virtual Lab of CSIR.
Hi everyone,
I'm Utsuka.
I am Jigyasa and
And
you are listening to India Asks Why,
a science podcast supported by India Bioscience.
where we do the research for you to get smarter.
Join us as India becomes more curious,
One question at a
time. Plants are everywhere and most of them are green. But wait, have you ever paused and wondered as to why that's the case? Like, why aren't all plants blue in color? Utsuka and Jigyasa have had the same question too. So join them to know about why plants are green. In the second segment, both of them get to ask their questions about why plants are green to Dr. Gitanjali Yadav, who is a plant scientist and a computational biologist at NIPGR India as well as at University of Cambridge. Not only that, they get to hear about the origin of photosynthesis and learn about her computational biology work and get a peek into what else a scientist does other than actually doing science. So stay tuned.
Oof, it's getting so sunny these days. I can't even look up without the sunlight piercing my eye. I wonder how plants stay in the scorching sun all day.
Oh, Jignasa, plants need sunlight to prepare their food. They photosynthesize, meaning they convert the sun's energy to food. If you remember from your science class, there is this pigment called chlorophyll that absorbs light energy.
And it's green in color? That's why plants have green color, right? But hold on. My question is, why is chlorophyll green in color?
That's an interesting question. As we know, visible light is made of 7 colors, the colors of the rainbow. The color that we associate with something is the color that it reflects. A banana looks yellow precisely because it reflects yellow and absorbs other colors. If something absorbs all the light from the sun, they look black.
Oh, that makes sense. Plants are green precisely because they reflect the green light. But this still doesn't answer my question. Why does chlorophyll reflect green light?
To answer that question, we need to go back to the sun. So the most energy radiated by our sun is the green light of the visible spectrum.
So, wait, more energy meaning more food. So, wouldn't it a good idea for the plants to absorb all the green energy, or for that matter, absorb all the energy from the sun?
Well, Jignasa, more energy is not always better. In this case, the plants cannot handle fluctuations of the intense green light very well. So, for example, the clouds might block the sunlight, or there could be a sudden shade. Unlike us, they just can't move to catch the continuous sunlight, you see. So, this sudden presence and absence of green light can lead to a sort of short circuit in the chlorophyll's home.
Just like the short circuit in our homes when there's a power fluctuation?
Exactly. So, what do these plants do? They play safe. They just reject some green light and mainly work with blues and reds, which are at the ends of the visible spectrum. So, these blues and reds are less intense and more stable compared to green.
Wow, that's interesting. I wonder how the plants developed this strategy.
Well, obviously, they didn't come up with this overnight. It took them millions and millions of years of evolution to come to where they are now.
And now it's time to ask a scientist.
Welcome back. We now have Dr. Gitanjali Yadav online to answer some of our questions. Utsuka, ask away.
So, Dr. Yadav, even though most plants are green, some aren't. Why is that?
As far as plants go, the color green is essentially the color of chlorophyll as we know. But the main point for you to know is the greenness is related to photosynthesis. It is literally like plants take sunlight and water, and they split the water and they create sugars, carbohydrates. So that means that you can just make food out of thin air. So the plants that are not doing photosynthesis are not green. So plants are green as well as non-green. There are many non-green plants. There's a ghost plant in India, which is also completely devoid of pigments. So there are pigments, and the presence and absence of pigments decides the color of a plant.
So, going a little backward in time, how did the plants evolve to photosynthesize? Did they evolve from a green ancestor too?
So photosynthesis, you have to basically think about the origin of photosynthesis, which was not with plants at all. Plants never began photosynthesis. Photosynthesis began in the oceans, and it began with bacteria. The first time that oxygenic photosynthesis began was in these people called the cyanobacteria, blue-green algae. They began oxygenic photosynthesis, which means that when you're splitting the water, it splits into two molecules of oxygen. And that moment in time, or that single evolution of that single reaction, the oxygenic photosynthesis, changed the face of the earth. That led to the evolution of so many other kinds of organisms, most importantly plants. So chlorophyll was the one which couldn't accept green. Chlorophyll has this particular chromophore inside it which cannot take green. Because it can't take green, or because it can't absorb green light, it throws it back out. And so you see only green. And so the lichen and moss and everybody were visible as green because they were having chlorophyll.
You study photosynthesis in the lab, right? How do you study it and what does it involve?
The major reaction that we are interested in is photosynthesis. And in photosynthesis, we are particularly interested in looking at the efficiency of photosynthesis and how can it be improved. We grow clammy in the lab. We call it clammy. We grow it in test tubes. And our job is to be able to, visualize, first of all, through microscopes. We do a lot of microscopy-based experiments, but we are also interested in what are the genes that get switched on during night and during day. How does the plant know when it is morning, when it is dusk, when it is dawn, pre-dawn, nighttime, everything. So we grow these clammy in the lab, and during the different points of time, during the day and night, every hour literally, we stop the growth, immediately extract the DNA and the RNA, and then we sequence it, and then we do a lot of data analysis with it. That's how we study these.
So does that mean you spend a lot of time with the microscope as well as on your laptop analyzing all that data?
The microscopy work is not something you can do in a short bit. So that is done by my students, and some of them are full-time sitting on the microscope. And so there are different people assigned to different tasks as you would have in a scientific laboratory. And we all work together so that, we are able to find the patterns that we are searching for.
So, Dr. Yadav, what does a typical day in your life look like?
So if you just take a typical day with me, so I may have different meetings with my students, collaborators, and my colleagues in funding agency during the day. But I prefer to keep some time for teaching, at least 2 hours for teaching. And I also prefer to keep some time for research. In that time of research, I do mostly writing of papers, thinking about new ideas, and trying to understand what our results have been. As a scientist, I have discovered that you are, you're not really that white lab coat wearing rat who is doing bench work and experiments all the time. Or now that I'm teaching, yes, that's not what it is. As a scientist, I find myself to be the manager of a small scale company. We need funds. We need to be able to run the lab, pay the people who are working for us, buy new equipment for them, be able to send them out, be able to publish their papers, pay for the charges, and sustain the lab so you've got to be a corporate sector manager to a large extent. It's like being the CEO of a company, my own little smallholder company, which I have in the lab, but that's critically important. So it's a very, very much a complicated business on a day-to-day level.
What's your message to someone who is interested in a career in science?
So if you're interested in a career in science, please make sure that you put aside some time in your life, in your day, to ask yourself, what are the questions that are unanswered? Just look outside, anywhere around you. Is there a question that is unanswered that science has not yet been able to answer? I had questions when I was growing up. I used to be in the forest, or most of the time spent time in sacred forests. And I used to wonder why trees and leaves have such different shapes, and why trees, all of them, don't have the same kind of canopies. Ask questions, as many as you can. Even if you can't ask to your teacher, ask yourself those questions, because you will remember them later in life. And maybe you will be the one finding those answers, right? So that's for a career in science, I think.
So now, Jignasa, do you understand the reason behind why most plants are green?
Yes, plants have evolved to use the red and the blue light at the ends of the spectrum, and they reflect the green light. They do this to prevent short circuiting their photosynthesis machinery. Dr. Gitanjali studies one such machinery in microbes. She says plants evolved from photosynthesizing microbes in the ocean, which were already green long, long ago. Her lab generates gigantic amounts of data on the genes which regulate photosynthesis. And they use computers to make sense of all that data.
And we learned that being a scientist is kind of like being the CEO of a company.
But listeners, what we know about the plants might change when we get more evidence with time.
Who knows? In the future, you might be the one who will be studying these plants, and you might find out something about them that we never knew before.
So,
Stay curious
and ask questions.
So that's it for today.
We'd like to thank Dr. Gitanjali Yadav for letting us interview her. And if you'd like to know more about her, we've linked her profile in the show notes.
If you have any questions, shoot them away to indiaaskswhy@gmail.com.
Or if you'd directly like to talk to us, join the fun on our Telegram group. Again, link in the show notes.
And for more updates on India Asks Why, follow India Bioscience at India Bioscience on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. The link is in the show notes.
Shweta N. Hegde and Ruchi Manglunia are the hosts of the podcast.
Shweta N. Hegde and Ira Zibu edited this episode of the podcast.
India Asks Why is sponsored by India Bioscience's second outreach grant, and we are also grateful to India Bioscience for hosting us.
We meet again in our next episode. Until then, stay tuned and stay curious.